Hello and welcome back to the Sheepdog Brotherhood. I'm Doug Hewlett, and I have with me, as always, Brett Atterbury. There he is. Look at him, folks.
Howdy.
Man,
Howdy.
how lucky is he? He gets to see himself every day in the mirror. So, Brett and I were talking before we came on. I'm in the process of reading, which is, I'm waiting for Brett to make a joke about, he's surprised I actually know how to read.
Still so happy you finally got that nailed down after 40-something years. You can read. Congrats.
Left to right, top to bottom, group of words is a sentence. That's a quote from, I think, what is it? Tommy Boy. Anyway. So I'm reading C.S. Lewis, and I'm reading Mere Christianity. And I stumbled on a line in it that kind of gave me pause, that made me think about sort of the state of society today, where we're at. And unfortunately, it made me think about how, what I'll say, the left co-opts meanings of words, right? Mm. They take a word, they take a benign word, they assign to it a new definition, and then it ruins the word. So keep that in mind as I read this quote. It says, let's see, let me start here.
And Doug, you're gonna Americanize the language a little
yes.
bit, right?
Yeah. So for those of you who don't know, Mere Christianity was actually started as an audio reading, right? C.S. Lewis, during the war, read, he was on the radio over the number of weeks talking about Christianity. He was brought on to speak about Christianity. Historically, C.S. Lewis had been an atheist. And through a relationship with another of his contemporaries, it's Tolkien, right? Yeah, Tolkien was his buddy, and kind of essentially brought him to Christianity. But they brought him on this radio program to talk about Christianity. But that's not even what I'm about to read is about. But what I'm going to do, as Brett pointed out, I'm going to sort of Americanize some of the language, because this was written in like the 40s in England. So I don't want it to go over, but it's, I wanted
or you can read it as is in your wonderful British accent.
Yeah,
which would be funny.
So it starts. We all want progress, but progress means getting nearer to the place where we want to be. And if you've taken a wrong turn, then to continue going forward does not get you any closer to the place you want to be. If you're on the wrong road, progress means doing an about turn and walking back to the correct road. And in that case, the man who turns back the soonest is the most progressive man. We all here's an example of using math. If I start to do a sum and I do it the wrong way, the sooner that I admit this and go back and start over, the faster I'll get to the correct answer. There is nothing progressive about being pig-headed and refusing to admit a mistake. And I think if you look at the present state of the world, and this was in 1940, it's pretty plain that humanity has been making some big mistakes. We are on the wrong road. And if that's so, we must go back. Going back is the quickest way to move forward. So ignoring the present definition of progressive, which anyone who's listening to this podcast is probably not progressive, but thinking about his definition of progress, the idea of moving forward, moving closer to where you're trying to get to, progress forward. His point being that to truly be progressive is to acknowledge when you've made a mistake, or you're on the wrong path, or you're on a path that's not leading you closer to where you want to go. You need to turn around, go back, and start over. You need to reflect on where you are and the path that you're on. And as I read that the other night, I just thought, how true that is. And plus, obviously he wrote that during, the height of World War II. So obviously his commentary on humanity's being in the wrong place, very accurate. but I can't say that we've progressed forward from that point. And it just made me think about how often in our own lives, look, there are times when in dealing with my wife or my daughter, as the words are exiting my mouth and I can't like reach and grab them and pull them back. How often do we all say the wrong thing, behave or react in the wrong way, be frustrated, whatever it may be? And then we stick to our guns of being wrong, continuing in that path of being wrong, and just like ride it into the ground rather than going, whoa, sorry, that was completely uncalled for, or that's my fault. I need to fix this and make it right. Yeah.
Could that be called pride, Doug? Maybe.
Sure.
I think it's a human trait, of course, but particularly strong with men. It's as you were saying that, and I know we're kind of open to talk about different topics on this podcast, but it's so interesting to me if since you brought it up, if we stick to the political left, which uses that word progressive, and it doesn't seem, to use C.S. Lewis's quote, it doesn't seem with progressives, so-called progressives, that there's a turning back once data shows that the original path was not the right one. For example, pretty well known with data in the United States cities that have been controlled by the left progressives, so-called progressives, for a long time. You can measure the progress in the city in terms of its citizens and, let's just say, their well-being, whether that's measured by health or financial or any other measure. And if I'm correct when I hear about this, it's been a downward trend like for decades. So how interesting is it that the data is there that says all these things, all these policies aren't working. The people in the community are not flourishing. They're becoming less well off year after year. Shouldn't we consider an about face, to use C.S. Lewis' example? Shouldn't we go back to the drawing board and rethink this? And it's curious to me that doesn't seem to happen at any level, at the federal level, state level, local level. And it kind of makes you wonder why. I don't know the reason why. Mm-hmm. But it's kind of the same thing you said a while ago. Maybe it's not so much at the individual level, but more at this collective political level. It's like once the words are cast, even if the data shows all these policies aren't working at all and people are actually going downhill based on these policies, is there too much pride to reel them back in and try a different road? I'm not sure.
It's sort of like, I don't know, maybe if you're making a dish and you're cooking and you inadvertently add too much of a particular spice, you kind of can't really take it out of the dish now that it's in there. So you go, all right, well, what could I add to it to try and fix this? Right? Like if the lid falls off the salt when you're putting it in, well, now you're going to have something really salty. How do I modify it? And I feel like rather than just saying, you know what, this dish is ruined, let's start over, I'm just going to keep adding crap to this terrible dish that I've made. And I feel like that's what we see happening over and over again, right? Like all this data, like I'm beyond irritated by, and you were a college athlete, beyond irritated by the whole idea of, men in lady drag, in lady face showing up and competing against women. And the fact that, everything that we see about transgender procedures and how the suicide rate is far higher after these people transition, right? And for those who are listening only, I'm making air quotes because you can't change your gender. I'm just, call me old fashioned and all, but can't change your biology. But we have all this data. We see that this isn't helping anyone yet. Let's just keep beating this drum and let's jam it down everyone's throat for the whole month of June. We see in the face of reality what works, what doesn't work, that it doesn't improve like the LGBTQ plus whatever says. It doesn't yield the results that they say it does, yet they're just going to keep doing it. Then they're going to keep doing it more and with greater ferocity even.
Yeah, I read, I think in the past 12 months, I think it's in England, since we'll stick with our C.S. Lewis England theme. They, as a country, had gone like fully down the path of the whole transition thing. And that's, it's embedded in the medical system and all that. And then just based on data of outcomes, saw how, the data wasn't like marginal. It was like, oh my gosh, in your face, this is terrible for everybody, everybody involved across the board. And they've started to retract and rescind like all kinds of things, kind of going back to the drawing board. So maybe there's hope. It says, now I don't know if that's the politicians or the health departments or, bureaucracy. I'm not sure. But I've read enough that it's a pretty big trend in European countries now, who I think perhaps were a bit out in front of the U.S. in this regard. No expert on that. But the point being is like, if there's people who have some courage, who will just look at the data, even if they had originally believed, going down this path was going to result in greater flourishing for more people. Once the data came out and said that, in fact, is not the case, let's stop that. Let's stop that and go back to the drawing board. What it's going to look like when they go back to the drawing board is it's back to the way things used to be. And with no change, I doubt that. People always are looking for what they can muck with in order to try to improve. But at least they recognize the problem based on real data and, turn the ship around. In the U.S. right now, I hope that happens. Maybe there's some hints of it happening right now on some local, state level things. Not too sure, but it's certainly not happening culture wide yet, for sure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And then you think, go ahead.
What's that?
And you think about, I was thinking about, I think you were saying, both of us were college athletes, and I just can't imagine. It would have been, no matter what I was, going back when I was in college, no matter what I was shooting in my body and all that, it just would have been so completely unfair for me to compete in the 1,500, 800 meters against young women. There's just, I don't understand how that is even accepted at any level. I don't understand that at all. It's just massively unfair.
Well, think about it too, right? In track, like you had qualifiers to get into big nationwide meets. You needed to run a particular standard. Yeah. There was a men's standard and a women's standard, and they weren't anywhere near each other.
No.
So
not even in the same universe, especially
correct.
As the distance gets longer. They're not even. It's different worlds.
And that's not to say that a woman couldn't beat a man, right? There were some girls we had on our team that were outstanding athletes and could beat some of the guys, right? Those guys weren't very good, but like, that's the thing. They weren't very good and the girls could beat those guys. But there's the NCAA has a standard for women's times for events and a men's standard. Like, I don't understand how the NCAA can support, like, oh yeah, he's a guy, but now he's a woman, air quotes, and now he has to hit a much lower standard. My issue isn't with the standard. My issue is with the fact that we're pretending that we can change our DNA, and it blows my mind. I see people post on LinkedIn, supporting, yay, NCAA and, the progress of the transgender community to be able to compete, and how wrong it is that Leah Thomas is not able as a man to compete in the Olympics as a woman. Like, yeah, he shouldn't.
Yeah, it's kind of disheartening to see the lack of courage displayed by people who are just going along to get along, because what they've learned is, if you stand up and say you're against this, the left will shout you down, shame you, cancel you, and all those kinds of things. And it's kind of the situation that we're in right now. And Doug, I was telling you earlier, I was taking a class this week by the Authentic Leadership Foundation, an advanced training. And we always, we study about the virtues and things like that, character and the virtues, principled decision making. But then we have a really good tool that we use, which is it's a 2x2 matrix. And on the vertical axis is human dignity. So you always want to be looking for decisions that increase human dignity, and your horizontal axis is the common good. So those decisions that benefit everybody that we all have in common, whether that's your family all the way out to, the planet, basically. And so you're looking for decisions, if you can, you want to shoot for decisions that both increase the dignity of everybody involved and the common good. And so when you look at this track decision, it's like a strikeout you're like lowering human dignity. For trans people, you're lying to them. You're telling them something about themselves that isn't true. Mm-hmm. For, in this case, with women who compete against men who are pretending to be women, they lose out as well. Common good, what common good is there in any of this? It's like nobody feels, or nobody benefits in the common good of this, because it's not based on truth. It's not based on reality. And I think, more and more, I know we're just kind of focusing on this transgender issue, but more and more in this so-called progressive kind of ideas that come out of the left, I see that across the board. It's like a lot of things they do completely decrease human dignity and the common good. Back to talking about where we started with the cities in the United States that are just that are so politically left that it's like no matter what these people do in terms of making mistakes, it seems that no one will vote them out of office, so they could actually do something different. Mm-hmm. But it seems like all the policies just end up decreasing the dignity of the citizens in the city. A lot of it is around, like making them dependent on the government. And then the common good suffers, people, very good, people who are very productive and good, virtuous people leave and go to other places. So the city no longer gets the benefit of those people who are very virtuous, who provide a lot of value to the city and the kinds of things that they do through their professional activities. It's just like a complete drain. And it reminds me of like a cancer. It just eats away at the city. Like some of these cities, I probably don't want to name one because we'll get complaints about it, but one that jumps into my mind because it's commonly in the news about these things is Detroit. And even though, from my understanding from some people who live in Detroit now, there's a bit of a renaissance going on, but man, that city just went like just nosedived for decades because of these kinds of policies. And again, it's like, why wasn't there the turnaround? Clearly this isn't working. Let's go back and get back to the drawing board and start again. And it just seems, I won't say it never happens, but it certainly takes a long time for those kinds of things to kick in, if they ever do.
Yeah. I don't have a response to that. Good point, Brett.
What else would you like to talk about?
I brought that up. What would you like to talk about,
Mr. Hewlett? Yeah, I want to go back to that class a little bit, because as we were participating in that class, and in my mind always on my mind is our theme for this Sheepdog Brotherhood, that God has assigned as a duty to every man, the dignity of every woman. So on my mind this week was a lot about what is human dignity, and we discussed that in the class, because another thing that we talk about in this class is definitions are everything. Because if we don't get down and really understand what the heck it is we're talking about, we won't really know what to do with it. So, if you and I went out and polled 100 educated men and said, what is dignity? They're going to come up with a lot of good things,
mm-hmm.
A lot of answers, and all sound good, but I can almost guarantee you that there's going to be massive inconsistency there as well. Everybody knows it's a good thing, but everybody doesn't know exactly what it is. So you have to understand, what is it before you can talk about, if I understand that definition completely, then I'm able to evaluate what I'm doing, whether it is actually increasing human dignity, flourishing, or decreasing it. So I thought this definition, which I'll read and like to hear your reaction, was really good. So here it is. Human dignity at the very foundation stands on the conviction that each person, regardless of age, condition, or ability, is an image of God, and so endowed with an irreducible dignity or value. Each person is an end in himself, not to be used as a means, a who, not a what, a someone, not a something, by virtue of being human. So in authentic leadership, when we talk about dignity, that's the definition that we work with. What do you think, Doug?
I think that is completely counter to where we're at in society today. Yeah. I feel like we see everyone as a means to an end, the exact opposite of what that quote calls for, right? I'm going to make a connection. I'm going to go to this networking event, not so I can meet someone and have an interesting conversation, but I'm going to meet this person so I can get myself closer to this thing that I want. I'm interested in this woman because, maybe I'm lusting after her and she can get me this thing that I want. I feel like in general, we use people right now, and that's completely common. You see on social media, people talking about how to make themselves happy, right? There's such a huge push on, how do I take care of me right now? I'm in a season of me. I want to focus on me right now. And, if you don't have any mirrors in your house, you have no idea how you look. If you don't actually take the time to look at yourself in the mirror and see what image you're presenting to the rest of the world, you're just trapped in your own mind and your own thoughts, focused on your desires and your wants and your needs. Yeah. But you're not looking to see what the outward view of you is. When we're constantly focused on satisfying our own wants and needs and desires, we completely we see naturally then, I think with that type of attitude, it's natural that it would flow from that you're going to see everyone else as a way for you to get what you want out of the person in front of you, because they are a thing to be used in a way to get you what you want. And like we just see that everywhere, and I see it on LinkedIn all the time. People focusing on, look, everyone on LinkedIn is a consultant, is a whatever person that has a way to help you maximize X, Y, and Z. All of our relationships are transactional, it feels like. Yeah. It's really hard to get people to think about other people and put their needs first. Like, boy, what is my, you know what? I think my daughter needs me to be around more, maybe focus a little less on work this week, take some time off so I can spend some time. Let's go do a thing for the family. Not daddy needs alone time. But, what does my wife need? My wife doesn't need me to have alone time. My wife needs me to be more present, to be, taking care of the roles here at the house that I need to take care of. She doesn't look at me as a thing that, fills her needs. But I do those things because I'm putting her needs before my own. We've become very transactional.
Doug, I would imagine that a big part of that is just our natural brokenness as human beings. That's probably, I'm guessing a bit here, but foundationally, that's more of our natural inclination than to walk up and be completely present and saying, how can I help this person? How can I serve this person? And probably a big part of life is like, how do you stay more in the former mode? How do you stay present to that? How do I serve this person? How do I love them? Then in the latter, which is how do I use them? So it's like this ongoing battle that we'll have till our last breath about, am I seeing this person in front of me as a who, as a someone, rather than a what or a something? Because even, to your point, I go to a lot of events, and sometimes at these events are people who are well resourced and, believe in the mission that I believe in about the pro-life issue. And it's very difficult for me, if I know that they're well resourced, not to be thinking about the size of their bank account and how that could help our mission, rather than just not being concerned about that and just focusing on, as strange as it may seem, how can I serve this person, right? Mm-hmm. Maybe they've got an enormous bank account, but maybe in other areas of their life, they're completely bankrupt and need somehow to be loved right now in a way that perhaps that I either I can provide, or I know somebody can provide that. That's typically not my mindset. When I think about it, it's like, how do I get to know this person, get them involved in our mission and move them along, even in that, because there's in sales and same in fundraising, we have moves management, right? How are we moving them along to get what we need from them?
Here's where I think this comes from. Think of what's very common now in society: LinkedIn, Instagram, TikTok, etc. We are putting on display like a constant resume. Here's who I am. Here's what I can do. Look at all the great things that I have accomplished, right? So we're constantly putting into the world our value proposition, right? Not as a person, but as a value, as a commodity. Here are the things that I bring. I bring a background of doing medical device sales and marketing, and I'm really good at that. And that's all over my LinkedIn profile. And this is historic, right? So I talk about how good I am at that thing, so that someone sees my profile and wants to talk about, hey, here's a guy. And then I shouldn't be surprised when someone who's young in the career wants to get experience or network to somebody else, they reach out and they go, hey, I see that you've been doing this for 2 decades. Can you connect me to this person and that person? And we're like, oh, look at me. Look how great I am. People are reaching out to me to talk, to get my experience and connecting to somebody else. And
Yeah.
we are commoditizing ourselves by constantly putting on display our attractiveness, our network, our skill sets that I can do this thing, our sense of humor, right? Putting up funny videos all the time.
Sure.
We're all guilty. All of us, you, me, everybody is guilty of like taking who we are and breaking it down to a trait or a skill that communicates value to other people. So if we're doing it as we're out looking at YouTube videos, or you're on LinkedIn or making a post on LinkedIn, and you encounter someone else who is doing that, you look at them and go, oh, look at that. That guy's got a whole lot of value over here in this thing. Like, I should talk to this guy about that thing.
Yeah.
Rather than walking down the street, engaging with people who you don't know. So you don't know whether or not they are a person of value, meaning, can they further your career? Can they help your cause? You have no idea who these people are, but we do so much now virtually and so much online that we're used to looking at ourselves and others as what value does this person have, and can they advance me in what I'm trying to achieve? And I feel like a lot of it comes from just where we're at in society with social media.
Yeah. I was telling somebody the other day, this happened within the last week or two, but I was at some kind of reflection. It was a religious reflection that it talked about just the value. It was a homily, actually. It was a homily at Mass. And the priest was talking about just the value of being. You just, Doug, you just are. And that's just the most incredible thing in the world. Maybe if I didn't even know your name or anything about you, any of these things that you're talking about that purportedly gave you value according to others in society, you just are. Just by being yourself is the most valuable thing there is. And I thought, man, that's incredible. Well, that's incredible, and so unlike, to your point, where we are in society right now, where everybody's just, we assign value to people usually based on what they can produce, or maybe saying the same thing, what they can do for us.
Mm-hmm.
And kind of like, what a sad situation to be in. And so here we are in this country. Sorry, my fire alarm is beeping at me. Here we are in this society, and the wealthiest, most materialistic, well-off society in the history of ever. And like, look at the rates of depression, right? People don't feel valued by others just for being. They feel like they have to have all that resume stuff that you're talking about before people will value them in the way they deserve to be valued, just human dignity as human beings.
Well, I mean, we see it with our elderly, right? Like,
for sure.
Once you stop being able to perform a function at a high level, think of the greatest generation. Think of these guys that went off, they fought the Nazis, they won the World War, came back. These guys were rock stars, right? Now they're in their 90s, right? But let's say there's a number that are in their 90s. We're like, yeah, thanks, Grandpa. Like, I got to go make a tweet, right? Like, we don't have time for these people.
Yeah,
they put their lives on the line. They risked everything to safeguard the world, and now we can't be bothered. Let's just put them in a home. Like, I don't want to change Grandpa's bedpan. Like, let's let somebody else do it. Let's outsource this because he doesn't have value to me anymore. Like, that's not how we used to be. I mean, to some extent, I think we've always been like this, but
Yeah.
I feel like because we commoditize everything, I mean, we see it with, unfortunately, we see it. This isn't picking on women, but like we see in society right now, young girls who believe that their true value is how beautiful they are.
Yeah, sure.
And that's our fault as men for making them think that their only value is in how beautiful they are. And you see it with famous actresses, especially, right? Like, an actress who used to be the bombshell of that decade, now she's 70, now she's 60, or heck, now she's 40, right? And the desire to maintain, like, we all don't want, nobody wants to age and look old. I get that. But like, imagine if the only way you saw value in yourself was how you look. That's, all of us in society are doing a bad job if you're only as pretty as, or you're only as valuable as pretty as you seem to everyone else.
You remind me, I watched a movie within the past couple of months. It was another movie about Marilyn Monroe. Sorry, my dog.
You watch a lot of Marilyn Monroe movies?
No. But man, it really brought home exactly what you're talking about. This was just a young lady who had kind of a tough life growing up, and just happened to be endowed with physical beauty, and that's all the people wanted to use her for. And they really drive that home during the movie. She was just kind of she like all of us, she was really seeking authentic love and just couldn't get it. I mean, because the way that other men, but not just other men, but society in general, like, they wanted to extract some kind of value out of her. Like, she, to your point about being a commodity, the beauty, the entertainment, the excitement, and all that based around her physical beauty. And all she really wanted to do was just be authentically loved by people. And it was very clear to her that it just wasn't going to happen. And, kind of obviously led to her, in the end, taking the most extreme act and, taking her own life. And the suicide rate's now kind of off the charts, especially among young people. I guess based on everything we've discussed today, we shouldn't be that surprised, because this is what's happening. They just don't feel like anybody authentically loves them just for being who they are. We got all kinds of terrible names that we all use. We think it all the time because we're broken, that we assign to people because they're not like super productive, or not out there getting after it, and going and conquering the world. And, maybe that's just not their calling, or maybe it's not their time, or maybe it's not their purpose. And instead of, I think what we do a lot of times is we kind of project our own beliefs about that, about being super productive and all that kind of stuff onto those people. And when they're not up to that standard, then we just criticize them with all kinds of words that we use that are not very nice.
I mean, I think, to land the plane here, I think as men, that's our primary audience here. I think, other than the fact that you need to change the battery in your smoke detector.
What timing?
Yeah. I think it's really incumbent on us to recognize, at least, maybe take some time this week to think about how we engage and interact with the women that aren't even in our circle of influence, just women in general. How do you look at women? Right? Are you watching the Avengers movies and you see Scarlett Johansson and you're thinking one way, or are you thinking another way? And because if you're thinking, not that she's a good actress or she's playing this role well, or, it's just like, wow, she's really beautiful. I think we're part of the problem when that's all you see. We're not helping our daughters. We're not helping them have. We're not giving them a path to grow up and see that they have value because they're created in the image and likeness of God. We're
Right.
seeing that, they need to see that. They need to see that they have value because they exist, not because of what they look like, not because of what skills they have or don't have. So
Yeah, I
I think
think
that,
just boy, do all men need this, me included, is just having that willful intention of purity of heart in that regard, really keeping at the forefront of your mind what is human dignity, especially towards women. What does that mean? What does that look like in terms of the way I think, what my actions are? So, Doug, I'm going to take that upon myself too this week as my own challenge. It should be our challenge that we live day to day.
sure.
I think sometimes in this world, it's just so easy to let that stuff slip away and we just fall back into the bad habits. And so kind of putting a reminder on my phone this week to be intentional about that. So perhaps we do that this week and then we check back in next week and see how it went.
All right. Sounds good.
Thanks, brother.
Yep. Have a great week, bro.
You too, bro. Bye.
Bye-bye.